Good morning, people of the jury. How are we this morning? So, this is a short baby update. So, if you were around the last 48 hours, you will know that my son and his girlfriend went into hospital in the early hours of Sunday morning or Saturday night, however you want to call it, where she was having contractions and some of her waters had broken. She was then taken to hospital, taken to triage, where she had an internal examination to check whether the baby's head had dropped, whether her cervix was opening, and it turned out that more of her water broke. She was then taken to the delivery suite, where she spent a good portion of her evening. They were giving her steroids for the baby's lungs and steroids for the baby's brain fluid. And then they were giving her a drug to try and stop her labor, which didn't go well to start with. So her labor continued. She was still getting contractions and they were still coming. And this continued on and on until yesterday as well. Through yesterday morning, yesterday afternoon, she was getting contractions. By tea time, the contractions had slowed and then they stopped entirely. So the idea was to keep her in overnight, keep her in observation, check how she was, and reassess in the morning. In the early hours of this morning, her contractions started again. They weren't very intense, but they were still contractions. These turned out to be partially Branston Hicks's and partial real contractions. She also lost some more fluid, but they have been reassessed this morning and the contractions have now stopped again. The fluid that she is losing is a combination of fluid from her waters breaking and fluid from urine where the baby is pushing on her bladder. So because of Katie, if you didn't know, Katie is about 5'3" in height and my son is 6'2". The baby is measuring quite big and her pelvic area is quite small. That was why she was having the pelvic pain, that's why she was having the back pain, and that's why she was signed off work for 2 weeks. Now, this morning they have reassessed her again and the baby is laying down. It is in the right position, it's engaged, it's all in the right place to be like given birth to. But her contractions keep coming and going, and then the water that's leaking is at the minute minimal. They're not concerned about how much she's losing currently. If her waters to then were to like gush again, they might be more concerned. So currently, they've done an exam. She is losing water on occasion. She is getting contractions, but it would need to progress more before they would have kept her in hospital. Currently, she has been released as of this morning, and she will have to keep an eye on her contractions, how far apart they are, how long they last, and then she will have to keep track of how much fluid she's leaking. So the recommendation is to wear a pad continuously and keep up to date on the colour of the fluid, how much fluid she's losing, and keep an eye out if any meconium comes out within her fluid. Obviously, the baby isn't at full term and they would like to keep the baby in as long as possible, but it is a baby and babies will make their own decisions. So whether she keeps it in for another 48 hours a week or the whole 6 weeks she has left will be up to the baby at this point. They are planning to have another scan in a couple of weeks to check the baby's size again. If the baby is still in utero and still there, they are going to have another scan to check the baby's size and then decide whether the baby is then too big, and then they might actually have to induce her. But they're going to check again in a couple of weeks and give her another scan. They'll then check the baby, the fluid, and make sure she's not losing too much. Obviously, if she has a proper gush at home and she goes into full labour again, she's to go back up the hospital so they can keep an eye on the baby, whether it's in distress, the fluid levels and everything. Because the most important thing is if her waters continue to keep breaking little by little, the amount of fluid in the womb has to stay at a certain level, so they have to keep track of that. The contractions, will come and go. She's had Branston Hicks's for a couple of weeks. These ones were more intense. She was on gas and air at one point. And obviously being a new time mum, everything is terrifying. Everything is scary. She even said she was hearing another woman having contractions or giving birth in another room, and it kind of freaked her out a little, which it would freak me out. I was freaked out by mothers screaming when I was giving birth, and I was in labour for 24 hours with my first child. So I understand her concern. But the screams are the screams of joy. It means a baby's on the way. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad scream. And it's not necessarily screaming. It could be grunting sometime. It could be deep groans. There are screams. Don't get me wrong. It's no picnic to deliver a baby. The other concern is obviously she can't have morphine. She's allergic to it. So there are things like pethidine that she can have. She can have gas and air. But things that are more invasive, like a spinal tap, morphine and stuff like that, being allergic to it, she can't have diamorphine or morphine or stuff like that. She is limited to what she can have pain-wise. And obviously with it being a fairly big baby, like they said, they're going to check in a couple of weeks and make sure. If the baby is then like fully developed, the lungs and everything, they may just induce her within a couple of weeks, or the baby just might naturally fall into labour in the couple of weeks again. There's no telling. She could go home and fall back into labour again tomorrow. The drug should hold it off for a while, but the drug doesn't hold it off indefinitely. If the baby then decides it wants to be born, baby will be born. So at the minute, it is in the hands of the baby itself, whether it wants to stay in there or whether it wants to come out. You can only give the baby so many drugs to keep staying in. And obviously, the more fluid she keeps losing, the more dangerous it becomes, because if the fluid drops, it could stress the baby out, and there are loads of other complications that can happen that I'm not going to bore you with. But it is a tricky situation where the baby wants to necessarily come out, and primarily with it being 7 weeks early, you want to keep it in. It's had steroids for its lungs and, like I said, its brain. So that's helped the issue. If she was to suddenly go into full labour and deliver within 48 hours, the baby would have a more safer delivery. Obviously, it would probably still go to the NICU and everything, but they are fully prepared in case she does go into labour. She's just to go straight back up there. So there's a contingency plan. If she suddenly falls into labour, she just goes straight back up to triage and just go through the whole cycle again. And then they decide whether they stop it or not. Because you can only stop the baby going into labour so many times before you then put the baby under stress, and then it becomes a problem. The more important thing at the minute is the fluid level, and keeping an eye on that with a pad, keeping an eye on her contractions, making sure they don't get too close together, and just generally being on bed rest for the next 2 weeks minimum. She is meant to be going back to work for a week. She's got 2 weeks off with the doctor for her hips and that. And then she is meant to go back for a week. And then she then has a month's holiday. And then she goes on maternity as of August. But that is going to be up in the air whether she goes back for that week. I personally wouldn't. I would personally try and extend your sick note. Personally, and not go back for that week, because it sounds like the baby's already under a lot of distress as it is, and her hips and everything. I personally wouldn't want to stand up for 8 hours on a shift, but that's entirely her choice. If she feels well enough to work that last week, then by all means. A doctor might advise against it with her current situation and the hips and everything, but that's her personal choice. She could go back to the doctor and get another week, which is what I would do. I would just use it as a way of getting the bed rest for the next 3 weeks. Take your month's holiday, and then you have your maternity from August. So that is the baby update. It's a long update because it's been a long weekend. No one ever said having a baby was easy, especially me. I've had 3. I know the ups and downs, the Branston Hickses, the terror, the crying at night, the constant worrying. Both the baby and Katie are doing fine. A side note, my son, he coped really well. He was nervous as hell, first time dad, going to be nervous. He's still a teenager at heart, the pair of them. They are in their early 20s, so this is all new and the water's breaking, it can all be a bit traumatic. And luckily, they've got me, they've got my ex, which will be Grandpa, and they've got lots of support. So I'd also like to make a personal thank you to Bodacious, to J-Rum, to Anna, and to Dragon, who donated to get the rest of the baby stuff that we needed, because obviously we don't know when the baby's due. It could be tomorrow, it could be a week. Obviously, with the steroids and everything, trying to help the baby, you know, if the baby wants to come, the baby will come. So thank you to everybody that donated. The donations are apparently going to continue. Tammy is going to continue to scroll the donation underneath her chat. You can also donate by the GoFundMe, which will feature in every video and every live stream I do until they eventually give birth. I want to thank everybody who came to the live stream, words of support. The money is an integral part of a baby, but that's not only what you are for. You are an amazing bunch of subscribers. I cannot say enough. If I say any more, I might cry. But thank you to everybody, the likes, the comments, the shares, the support, the well wishes. Obviously, once the baby is born and everything further down the line, I'll update you. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart that such an amazing bunch of friends can just help you in your darkest moment. But I'll leave you all now. You know, the baby has a name, or will have a name. We're calling it Baby W at the minute. So if any of you boys and girls caught it the other day, I accidentally gave the name away. But don't go looking for it. But Baby W will be here at some point. And I will see you all for another update very soon. Once again, heartfelt thank you. And I'm going to go enjoy my day off. They're coming out of hospital in a few hours. I'm going to go see them. I'm going to go see Nala. If you haven't seen Nala, pictures in my Discord. And I will see you all very soon for another baby update. Once again, thank you all. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye, guys.